Morning, guys. I have so many things with me, so let me settle in. Now, I think this should work. Perfect. So, good morning. So I think this will make morning much more better, right? So what if I tell you that I can say that 80% of people in this audience likes to have coffee, right? What if I tell you that we are going into a world where we may not be able to have coffee? And I'm sure most of you guys are thinking, what is the chief data scientist for an agency like EPA interested in coffee beans, right? So my hope is that I can tell you the story that shows that how the work that we do at EPA influences something that you hold in your hands every morning before you go to work, coffee, right? Now, what you're looking at here is the regions that produce coffee beans across the world. And what is happening now is, as you can see that in spite of the conversation on is humans contributing to climate change or not, let's set aside that argument, right? What we know for sure is we are going into a world where we might have changes in the temperature. You are seeing increasing in the temperature. What does that mean for things that we use on a regular basis? So this is a prediction of how the climate change, or not, I'm not using the word climate change, rather than the climate change, this is what is happening with respect to the change in temperature for the entire globe, right? And as you can see, if you just put your eye line to the equator, you can see that the temperature is changing. And as I was saying, most of the regions that is producing coffee beans stay in the equator region. And the reason being, coffee bean likes to be at a certain warm temperature. Now, what would happen when you have change in temperature with respect to these countries? One, the coffee beans is going to have low quality. Two, you will see more pests that is not being seen in the current environment. And finally, it will affect the location in which it's being produced. So it's funny because when I was coming to the conference today morning, I was walking through my Flipboard. There is actually an article from NPR that was published yesterday night on how Ethiopia is struggling now with respect to coffee beans. And what is happening in Ethiopia now is there is changes in the temperature, and what is happening there is that the rainfall is changing. So Ethiopia is struggling with the amount of coffee they have been producing over the course of time. Now, what does that mean from us, right? Rather than the coffee that we like, there is 15 million people that has their livelihood depends on the coffee beans that is produced in Ethiopia. So you can see the impact, the geopolitical impact, even on just one thing, coffee beans, right? Now, Ethiopia is far from us, so people are like, okay, that's fine, it's another country. But I can tell you another one, Washington State. Washington State produces 70% of the apples that we eat in the United States. And what is happening in Washington State now is the same thing. The temperature is changing, and it causes a specific type of pest to live through the winter because winter is not as cold as it used to be. So the pest can stay through the winter, thereby the impact of that pest is getting more and more worse. So you can even see that apple that's produced in the northern United States could have impact of changes in temperature. Now, what I want to draw my attention to is, okay, so I'm the chief data scientist for the agency. I don't work on any of these things. I'm not trained climatologist. I'm not trained environmentalist. But what can I do to make us more effective in fighting these kind of changes? So now, if I change my hat to the pure geek hat, right? These are the three things that I believe will drive any of the public sector agencies to become effective in making these changes. One is data, what is analytics, and the third one is visualization. So from a data perspective, going back to the story that I started with, if we want to understand the impact of these changes that is happening in the world, simple, you need satellite images. And anybody who has ever worked with satellite images knows that it's in the ranges of terabytes or petabytes when it comes to the total amount of data that we have. How do we sift through that data to understand what is happening? Second one, analytics. When I talk to folks around EPA, one of the things that I constantly see happening at EPA is people are very much, or the scientists are very much interested in the traditional way of doing analysis, which is, okay, I will have a laptop, I will have a workstation, I will load 2 of the satellite images, and I will use look at one country, do the analysis, publish a paper. right? That won't cut it anymore, because we have to start looking at the entire globe as one piece. Now, the difference is, now people in the audience who knows about supercomputing, they're like, okay, why don't we use our US supercomputer to do this work? But that is very specialized machines. So the question that I have is, or the challenge that I'm trying to raise to the rest of the agency is, can we use analytical techniques that is used by the companies like Google, Facebook, to lead the market and bring that to the agency like EPA? For example, you know Spark. It's an in-memory computing platform, right? Can we use Spark and machine learning and bring in the satellite images onto a Spark cluster and do the analysis? The benefit being, I can deploy that in cloud. It's scalable, right? I can start looking at the entire globe in a much more faster fashion, and we can fail faster. So that is what is happening with respect to analytics at EPA. We are trying to look at, can we do these kind of things? It's just basically trying to start thinking outside the box of how we used to do our business before. Now, the third one, and this is another thing I'm trying to find out, and I came from private sector. So one thing that I'm seeing at the agencies, multiple agencies within the public sector, is we don't do a good job of telling the stories, right? Because the way I started this conversation is starting from coffee beans and showing that how the coffee beans could impact based on what is happening to the globe. And I think we want to start selling more stories to the public so that they understand that we are not just creating regulations. We are not just telling people not to do things. There is a reason behind it. So I think visualization is the key for anybody to tell the story much more successfully. So the visualization is very important. So I'm trying to influence the community within EPA to say that you need to start thinking about telling your stories using data and use visualization as a way to tell the story. Now, when I look at these things, I think that's my next, okay. So if you have to do this in an organization, how would you do that? So on a day-to-day basis, I have two roles. One is trying to look at the organization from a strategic perspective, understanding the organizational challenges, and start thinking about how I can use data as a platform to solve the challenges that we have. On the second hat is trying to think about how would I land this concept onto the runway, right? So how do I execute this? So at least so far, what I have seen being successful at EPA is you need to start thinking about services. Can we deploy services across the agency that will enable folks to solve the problem that I started with? And usually, it comes into 4 different pieces. One is the concept of data visualization as a service. Second one is analytics as a service. Third one is data as a service. The fourth one is geospatial as a service. And the reason I have geospatial as a service as a separate component is because a lot of work that we do at EPA is location-based. Thereby, we need to have a specific service focused on geospatial, because the geospatial data sets, the geospatial analytics, and the geospatial visualization is specialized in itself, that we need to have a specific platform that is delivering these kind of capabilities. Now, finally, if you want to see these kind of technology being adopted in the organization, you need to do 2 things. One is you need to have appropriate training protocols in the organization. Second one is make sure that there is a community. When we started doing the data science and data analytics and data visualization at the agency, we started a community of practice. And we have close to 200 plus members now, and we meet every other week, and people talk about the things that they are doing in their specific organization and share it with the rest of the agency, thereby creating that community and starting to share their stories, and we watch and learn what are the challenges that they have been going through. Now, of all the 3 services that I talked about, or the 4 services that we talked about, we have a data visualization platform now, so we are good. We deployed the data visualization platform almost a year ago. Now we have 1,000 applications that is running on that platform. It's a self-service platform. And one of the reasons why it was able to get a wider adoption is when I looked at the problem that I see with an organization adopting data science or analytics is the constant struggle with the IT department to deploy these kind of solutions. So the way we solved that issue was, the idea was if you want to use data visualization for your work, you shouldn't be calling the IT department and setting a ticket to get a software installed on your laptop. Can I do the same thing as simple as you logging into your Gmail. In other words, can I use the web browser as a platform for you to do and develop and share visualization? So the data visualization platform that we have at EPA is a full web-based platform. So the nice thing for us now is, if somebody in EPA wants to start using data visualization for their work, only thing they have to do is go to a link, click on it. Even the AD authentication behind the scene is automated. So you just click on the link, you are right on the platform, you can start working on your visualization and tell the story from there. 1. 2, geospatial, we are good. We are looking at the next stages in advanced visualization for geospatial. So geospatial is going well. Data as a service, and if you know, there is a website called envirofax.com, that is, .org. That is run by EPA, and the purpose of that website is to provide EPA data to the public. And what we are looking at that is the next phase of developing that Envirofax to the idea of data as a service. And I think what I tell my team is, the idea is I want a Redfin for an EPA, right? When we go to Redfin, how easy is for us to access information with respect to any kind of property that we are looking at? Imagine a world where you come to that Envirofax page, you can search your location, you can search any question you want, and then we should be able to pull the information from the behind the scene, right? So the concept of data as a service. Now the fourth one that we are looking at is, how do I democratize artificial intelligence or analytics or deep neural networks? You pick your term. I think people are calling it as cognitive intelligence, cognitive analytics, so many terms flying around it. But at the end of the day, what I tell my staff is, it's mathematics and statistics, right? That's the constant in the conversation. It doesn't change, but everything else will change. It could be called data scientist, it could be something else 2 years from now, 10 years from now. But basically, how do I make sure that my scientist or EPA scientist or EPA program office can use these techniques to analyze data? So the question is, how do I democratize analytics? So one thing, again, going with the success of data visualization, the challenges are, I don't want a software installed on the laptop for this to happen. Can we create a web-based deployment? Now, when you look at the web-based deployment, if anybody is interested in the technology side of things, you know that there is very few products in the market that will give me that. There is one mainstream open source tool called Jupyter Notebooks. So that seems to be the pick for us now. Now, starting with the initial conversation I had, even Jupyter Notebook won't give me ability to access Spark cluster or ability to access MapReduce behind the scene. So in fact, what we are looking at now is, how do we Dockerize the Jupyter Notebooks, deploy that onto the cloud platform, one. Second step is, how do we make sure that we can have a seamless integration of these techniques, these Jupyter Notebook, with these advanced analytical techniques or advanced analytical infrastructure components like Spark or MapReduce. So it's a technology challenge, and what I am doing there is also what I am observing from the commercial or the private sector, right? I am also putting so much effort to make sure that a person or a scientist does not have to go through spinning up clusters, logging into a cloud interface. The idea is, I want the scientist to come to a web page, start picking the language of choice they want to use, Python, R, pick any poison you like, start writing the code, access the data using data as a service, do the analysis, should be able to connect to Spark if they want Spark today. If they want to use MapReduce, they should be able to connect to a MapReduce cluster, run the analysis, store the data, pull it using the API, pull it into a data visualization platform, visualize, tell the story, right? That's the entire workflow of how I can tell a story more successfully. So that's basically the vision that we are looking at EPA. Now, another thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people are interested in the use of sensors for monitoring the environment. So currently, if you look at the air quality sensors that we have deployed across the US, that is how the distribution look like. Now, what you're looking at is the distribution of smartphones across United States. So think of a world in which we can actually use smartphones to monitor our air quality, and think of a world where we can access that data and use it. So with that in mind, one thing that we have done is considering the uniqueness and the progressive thinking with respect to these kind of problems, we realized that it's very difficult for us to do this from an EPA perspective. So we used the concept of crowdsourcing or citizen science here. So we created a challenge, and the challenge was basically we challenged the cities to tell us how would they be able to deploy 300 sensors to monitor air quality. And if you do that, how would you create a platform behind the scene that will have open APIs so that as EPA or as anybody who is interested in understanding the air quality of a specific city, they don't need to deploy their own sensors. They will go and call the APIs and get the data, and then they do the downstream analysis. And the winners for these challenges are Baltimore City, and then we have Lafayette. And it's an amazing journey so far, and I love the call that I have with these folks, because when I talked to the Lafayette folks, I had the people from all the way from the mayor's office on the call, and they were like, this is great. Now we have actually an excuse and a reason for doing this. And so they are very excited about deploying this. And I didn't even know about this. Like Lafayette has a full optical fiber network throughout the city. So they are going to leverage that with the sensors connected with Amazon. I think they are going to leverage, no, they are using Azure to do the IoT platform and deploy that. On the other hand, Baltimore is more and more focused on Amazon, I believe. But it doesn't matter. CSP is not the key focus, but I think if you can see the end-to-end platform like that, that will change the way we do some of these environmental sensing. So, yeah, this was basic. Oh, this is actually the deployment of air sensors at the Lafayette. People are setting this up on the electric poles, and I think that is the picture on the right side with the students is basically what Baltimore did was they brought high school students. So high school students are actually doing programming, deploying things on Raspberry Pi. So even from a STEM education standpoint, this is driving the high school students to understand how the things like technology can actually help you become a much more better citizen. So talked about a lot of these things. Most of people are thinking like, okay, how can you do this? Again, nothing fancy here. Again, the concept of startups. Everything that I have been talked about here so far is based on the idea that we don't need to sit in a room and have 6 months of meeting to write down what we think, right? Let's start. We will learn as we go, and we will make sure that it will be going in a direction. But I think one thing I'm learning is implementing such a concept in public sector is too draining from my standpoint, because it takes too much time to have conversation in corridors, conversation in multiple places to make sure that people understand the value of what you're doing, because some people like to see things in written statements. So what we say is to not worry about the written statement, we will show you the products. So the way we have been successful in that one was we create solutions faster. And it's not fully working, but we will be like, this is a mock-up, this is half of it. You like it or don't like it, and give me the feedback. So it's helping the agency to understand that we are not just throwing things in the sky, there is actually things being developed. So being electrical engineer by training, and I love this quote by Thomas Alva Edison. So this is what he responded to when he created the incandescent lamp. So he did more than 10,000 or 1,000 materials to find out what is the right filament that we see in the incandescent lamp. And when one reporter asked him, look, so you failed 1,000 times. And his response was like, no, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found out that there are 1,000 elements that we cannot use to make incandescent lamp on. So the same concept, right? How do we do the same kind of mentality and the change in an organization so that we can do these things? And I think what I was thinking was there is limit, because public sector, being the way the funds happen, we don't have the luxury of a full startup to start something and fail, right? So how do we do that in a fashion that is actually honoring the taxpayers' funding? So the way we have been trying this out is we don't create projects that requires large funds. We create projects that require small funds, one. Two, we have people who is closely watching the progress so that we know that if this is not going in the right direction, we can clearly say, okay, stop it, don't do it. Let's think about a different way of approaching the problem, right? So bringing the concept of startup into public sector is a good idea, but it's not as easy as just, a VC giving me $1 million and fail and nobody is going to worry about it, right? I will definitely have to report to somebody if I spend $1 million and there is no product out there, right? So how do I do that? Again, concept is great, bringing that into public sector requires so much conversations and discussions, but that's fine. So with that, I think that was my short presentation. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you. Oh, now I think, do I pick the question? Okay, I'll pick one. So I think active. Okay, all right, sure. So question is, have you already started using Spark at EPA? What is being used for and tested on? So the challenge with Spark is, it's a completely different way of organizing your data. It's a completely different way of thinking about machine learning. So what we have been doing there is, in order to increase the adoption of Spark, we are starting to find people within the agency that is using machine learning or neural networks or any of those techniques, and talk to them and say that, okay, you are doing something, it takes 3 weeks for you to run it on a laptop. Let us work with you and show you a different way of doing the same analysis. So we have some projects that is happening. So it's a cultural change at this point for us to get the scientists believe, or scientists or the rest of EPS see that, okay, you can use Spark for a faster time frame. So it's happening. It's not like I have a specific use case yet. Even though we have done some, one success that I can think of is, this is not coming from analytics, but what we have done is there is some databases or a transactional system that is being used at the agency for doing some kind of materialized view, creating materialized view that takes overnight, or it takes a weekend to process. We have shown that you can use Spark and do that analysis and bring the materialized view back onto the transactional system, so it's easy for you. You're not using your transactional system for, it's not meant for. So that's one use case for Spark for us. What can other federal agency, okay, sorry. So this is an interesting question. So one thing that we are looking at now is, a lot of agencies have the same problem, right? And I'm also learning more about it, because even if you look at the air quality, EPA only monitors the air quality across the land, US land. There is a whole set of organization within the Department of Interior who is focused on collecting data about air quality across the continental shelf. So what we are doing is trying to find out partners across the federal government who might have data that is relevant for us, and start thinking about how we can integrate it. And in order for us to integrate that, the first thing to do is go outside of your data center, start thinking of cloud as your platform for this kind of work, so which we are doing, and then start thinking about how we can create more solutions that can cross-cut. It's going to be challenging, but I think we are looking at how we can do that. Problem is I'm flying blind here because I don't know if I'm answering the question, but. So the way I usually answer these kind of questions these days is simple, right? Because again, if you look at the organization of public sector, and again, I'm learning more than I should these days, but there is the political appointees, there is the career appointees like SCSers, and then we have the staff, right? And what I tell the folks around me and my family and everybody around me who talks about how we are going to move the country forward, my answer is, the real work does not happen at the White House. Real work does not happen at the administrator's office. The real work of EPA or real work of any public sector happens at the cube, right? So what I'm trying to do is enable the people who are actually doing the work to do their work forward. And that's why I think services are the key for us to make sure that these kind of political climate won't affect us in moving forward. Because if a climate scientist has the ability to visualize his data, store his data, analyze the data, does it matter who is the President of the United States? No, right? He can still work still work on the problem that he is working on. So that's what I'm trying to take the angle on. And I think some of these things will change. And even open data is something that the administration is very much in favor of. So it's not that bad. How are you making query step easy for? So this is interesting. So what we have seen happening, again, this is where the concept of lean startup sometimes help, because when we started deploying the platform, we didn't worry about the data that much, because we wanted the agencies to start embrace the concept of self-service visualization and show them that they can tell stories on data that they sit in a spreadsheet. But now what is happening is data owners are coming forward and saying that, see, I see that this data is beneficial for the entire agency. So I want to think about creating a specific pull of the data behind the visualization platform, so that when people come in and start visualization, they know that, okay, if I'm going to use this program data, here is the program data. So it's changing. There is a couple of you. So within the community of practice, there is a subgroup focused on creating data set that is relevant for the entire agency. And that is a pure natural outgrowth. We didn't do anything. Somebody came up to us and say, I want to lead this user group. Can we start it? We were like, sure, good. So I think I got no more questions, hard stop. There you go. That is my last question. So thank you.